morning and warm greetings from Penang, Malaysia. Thank you for joining us for our second keynote session of PELTA's 10 International English Language Teaching Conference. I'm Wanwar Asma Arshad, the moderator for this session, and I'm glad to welcome all of you to this session. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Allen Davenport, the speaker for our second keynote session. Hi, Allen. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning.
Hi. Right. Let me have the pleasure to introduce you to our audience today. All right. Mr. Allen Davenport is a professional learning and development manager for Southeast Asia at Cambridge University Press. He has been actively involved in English teaching for nearly 2 decades as a teacher, training consultant, academic director, and examiner for numerous international exam boards. Allen's professional interests include the development of creativity in learners and investigating how English language teaching is adapting to meet the changing needs of language learners. Today, Allen will be sharing with us his ideas about developing live competencies in English language classroom. Feel free to ask questions or send your comments via the chat box. Do log in into your YouTube account to enable this feature. And so, without further ado, over to you, Allen.
Thank you so much. Like I said, just such a pleasure to be here. I speak at a lot of conferences, but PELTA, to me, it always feels like I'm coming back to a family and a really great community. So thank you to the executive board and President Rovina Kapel and everyone for having me. But I think I should get on with the talk because time is limited. So let me see if we can get the slides going. Fantastic. There we are. As it was mentioned, we're going to talk about developing life competencies in English language classrooms. And I think it's obligatory these days for presenters to start with a quote. So here's a quote for context. For more than 100 years, much complaint has been made of the unmethodical way in which schools are conducted, but it is only within the last 30 that any serious attempt has been made to find a remedy for this state of things. And with what result? Schools remain exactly as they were. Now, I will say that this quote was written before the pandemic, but just in the comments, if you want to, we can see the comments through the program that we're using. If you agree with that quote, can you write an A? If you disagree with that quote, can you write a D? If you are half and half, can you just, do maybe like A/D? I'm just wondering, how do you feel about this quote? Okay, got a D right away. That's cool. That's cool. Wait for time for one more. I'm looking on the Facebook. I see some A/D, some Ds, and that sort of thing. So good. We have some disagreements, some A/Ds. Now, I've used this quote for quite some time. And the reason why I've used this quote for quite some time is I've been interested in 21st century skills and 21st century learning for about the past 20 years. And what I have noticed is a shift in how people kind of react to this. I did expect, I'll be honest with you, a couple of more A's, but I expect it to be more mixed with A and D and more D's than we would have seen 30 years ago. I think, though, we've all been in situations where we felt the way that this quote has. And what I would say that we need to keep in mind about this need for educational reform or this need for, schools being slow to change is to remember that this quote was written in 1632 by John Comenius of the things requisite before this universal method. So this idea of wondering about school change or what we need to be teaching or the purpose or the roles of schools, it's something that has been talked about for a very long time. And it's more of like a pendulum swinging, it seems, than progress continually going forward. But having said that, I think that we need to acknowledge the 21st century learning movement. And by this time, it's nothing new. We are in, we're a fifth of the way through the 21st century. But we do need to acknowledge that we're in the midst of what the people who are bringing us 21st century skills were talking about. The 21st Century Skills Initiative really is about fitting with what the theme of this conference was. It was about education standards and reform movements that's focused on improving what students must learn in schools so that they're better prepared to succeed in their school and career lives for their futures, whatever those futures may be, whether they're traditional jobs, which some will be going away, some traditional jobs will be remaining. I don't see the job of a teacher going away anytime soon, or some new jobs that we haven't even imagined yet. These are some of the newest jobs that we have these days: drone standards specialist and 3D food printer chef and cryptocurrency manager. If I would have said to my mother when I was growing up that I want to be a cryptocurrency analysis person, a banker, she'd slap me in the face and say, "Get real, talk about something that's real." But the whole idea, if we're really talking about preparing learners for the future, we have to look at it from this idea of what their future is going to hold. Now, what I do appreciate when we look at some of the studies or some of the research is that the same themes keep on coming up again and again and again. And one of the measurements that I look at is from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And I like to look at how they've been asking, I should say, a survey of employers. It is kind of North American focused, but there's enough research that says that this is very indicative of what happens when we ask this question around the world about what employers are looking for. And it's really been a balance of 12 to 13 different skills that kind of jumble in order, but we see the same things again and again and again. Now, I'm going to show you their most recent list. I'm going to show you the top 5 skills that employers want. And as I'm showing them to you, get ready, because I'm going to ask you in the YouTube chat or the Facebook, whatever you're looking for, or whatever you're watching this on. I'm going to ask you how many of these skills you think are natural fits for the language classroom. In other words, how many of these skills that employers want make sense for language teachers to take on the role of developing. The first skill that employers say that they want is the ability to work in a team. They're looking for people that have the ability to work in a team. Number 2, problem-solving skills. Number 3, analytical quantitative skills. Number 4, communication skills, specifically verbal. And number 5, communication skills, specifically written. And I'll say this survey is from 2021. It is in our current COVID world. Just in the chat box again, or the comments, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. How many of these? I just want to see 2 people tell me. How many of these do you think are natural fits for the language classroom? You don't have to tell me which ones. You just have to tell me how many. So, we have a couple of people who say 5, all 5. For me, I think it depends, of course, on what type of, English classroom we have. If it's, a CLIL classroom, if it's, English for specific purposes, if it's a communication class. But for me, I think we would say at least 3. Thomas very rightly says maybe 3 needs a bit of a stretching. I don't know if I would say all 5 are natural fits. I would say that 3 of them at least are natural fits, and maybe 4 and 5 if we work it right. And the reason why I bring this up is I still think to this day that sometimes this idea of 21st century skills or future ready learners, then it always gets in these talks in education about STEM or STEAM or liberal arts, or exactly what one of the comments says, do we have a practical need, or do we do liberal education in our classes, but regardless of that debate, I don't know if it's something we really need to think of as an either or, because if we do this right, we don't have to have a separate lesson to develop these skills. We can slide them into our lessons. And I want to try to show you how we try to do that with Cambridge. The underlying thing is, I also don't like that quote from Comenius anymore. I disagree with it, although 20 years ago, I think I would have agreed with it. I think I want to replace it with this quote that just reminds us that language teaching is teaching. And again, Michael Fullan was one of the pioneers of the 21st century movement. And he reminds us that the moral purpose of teaching is to make a positive difference in the lives of students and to help produce citizens who can live and work productively in increasingly dynamically complex societies. And it's not an either or. It's not, are we trying to develop students, or are we trying to prepare them for the world of work? It doesn't have to be an either or. We can have both. So I've been working with a team at Cambridge, doing very little work at it. I mean, other people, Jasmine Silver, Ben Knight, Jade Blue, a lot of my colleagues have really been putting a lot more effort into it than I have. But we've been really, for the past 3 or 4 years, looking at how we can prepare students to succeed in a world that is changing fast. And we've done lots of meta studies, not just about this one report, but we've looked around the world and tried to see what is global in employment and what is global in lists of 21st century skills, beyond the 4 C's or sustainability goals. What are the same themes that we see again and again and again? Not doing our own research, but trying to synthesize the research that's out there. And overall, we saw some trends that I think are still relevant today, especially, like I said, with this conference theme. We see the increasing need for people to work together with people from around the world, to think creatively and solve problems, to analyze sources more critically, to communicate our views effectively, and to maintain a positive mindset in an increasingly complex world. So at Cambridge, we asked ourselves the question, how can we support the development of these skills, specifically in language classrooms, not necessarily in math classes or computer science classes, although I think some of these transfer. We've taken the approach that this is something that belongs in the language skills and in the language classrooms, and these skills are developed there. So we created a framework to relate English teaching to future readiness. And this is what the framework looks like. For those of you who saw my presentation 2 years ago, you got a sneak peek at this because we were developing the framework, but it wasn't in its final form. Now, 2 years later, I can say we've got it at a place where we like it. Now, our framework is complex, and I like this graphical organization, but I want to kind of take you through our thinking with it. And I like that it's round. I like that our design team made it round because I like to think of a framework like a pizza. And just for fun, just so I can get some comments in the chat box, let me know what your favorite kind of pizza is in the comments. Go ahead. I know we have some numbers in the box, and we have all the things I've asked for before. But now I'm asking for your favorite kind of pizza as I'm going through this framework. Drop in either on the YouTube or on the Facebook chat. What is, in your mind, the best kind of pizza? There's no wrong answers except for pineapple. In my mind, pineapple does not belong on pizza, but we'll see how people do that. Azran says, peri peri. I could not agree with you more. That is a flavor that belongs. I don't know if anybody wants to fight me about pineapple. Prove me wrong with the comments. But that's it. We've got some pepperoni. Absolutely. The reason why we say this is I say it's like a pizza, I think the people who develop this always roll their eyes when I bring this up. But it's like a pizza because one of the things that we don't pay a lot of attention to in the pizza is the crust, the base of the pizza. Even though that To have a pizza, we need the base. Now, sometimes, some places will do fancy things with their base. They'll stuff the crust with cheese or other things. But in general, we take the crust of the pizza for granted unless it's burnt, unless the crust is bad. But the crust is that foundation, that bread part. And we have foundation layers to our framework. And just like you have a bite of crust in most bites of the pizza that you have, we think that in the foundation layers, you need this through your lesson and all parts of an English lesson. Before you can get to those other parts of life competencies, we need to have these three things: discipline knowledge, language. If we're English teachers, our students have to learn English. If they leave being creative, but they can't speak English or use English, then we haven't done our jobs. Also on our framework is digital literacy. Now, our definition of Cambridge at digital literacy is not that you must use technology. It's that if you're using it in an appropriate way, that you understand, your privacy rights, that you understand screen time and how it affects health, that it's the proper use of technology. And digital literacy is about using it correctly and sometimes knowing when to not use it. So I don't want you to think that digital literacy being on our foundation layers means that we must use technology. It means that if we use technology, we have to use it for a purpose, not just because it's there. And emotional development. And again, emotional development to us is, some of the, social and emotional learning needs, keeping motivation high, looking at our mindsets in the classroom, as Tomas said earlier, trying to find those moments of flow, that type of emotional development. It doesn't mean that we're counselors all the time that fix all their problems, but that sort of part. And so with our pizza, the part of the crust that we get with every single bite, that's what we would need. And again, we don't notice it a lot unless it's not done correctly. But you could have the best toppings on the pizza. If the crust is bad, it's a bad pizza, because you can pick some toppings that you don't like off. If the whole crust is burnt, you have to throw the thing away. I'm not going to spend more time talking on the foundation layers. I'm going to move ahead and talk about what we think are the toppings. And for us, these will look fairly similar. Nothing is going to be, oh, wow, I've never seen these before. But these are going to look fairly similar. But when we've looked at synthesizing what the skills that we need to develop for future readiness are, the competencies are, they boil down to these 6 things. Creative thinking, which is a little bit different than creativity, but that's a different session. But specifically creative thinking, learning to learn, collaboration, critical thinking, communication, and social responsibilities. Now, you've heard me say the word skill a lot for it. That's because I'm being a little bit lazy and I'm not monitoring my language. Technically at Cambridge, we call these competencies. And it's important that I acknowledge that, because competencies, it's about knowledge, skill, and attitude. So skill is part of competencies, but it also involves knowledge and our attitudes to it. What the Common European Framework calls all of its savoirs. It's savoir-faire, it's savoir-être. But basically the knowledge, skills, and attitudes we have towards these things. However, for me, if you call them life skills, if you call them 21st century skills, up to you. We're pretty much talking about the same thing. We just like to call them life competencies at Cambridge because we think that these were skills that were probably needed before the 21st century and are going to be needed after the 21st century. And again, we call them competencies instead of skills because it encompasses all of these things. But like I said, if you hear me call them life skills, same thing. I live in Thailand. I'll say same, but different. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, so what? I've seen lists like this before. It's just the 4 C's and another 2, right? I mean, why are you a keynote speaker at this illustrious conference? This is nothing new. Well, what we wanted to do at Cambridge was go further than what has been done. So we've created what I like to call our 3-dimensional framework. And this is what's new. The first thing that we've done is we've tried to adequately define what these competencies are, because a lot of the lists that we've seen say, we want creativity and collaboration and all of this. But if we ask a teacher what communication means, they have one definition. And if we ask another teacher, they have a totally different definition. So we wanted to clearly define what these terms mean to us. And just for fun, you don't have to put it in the chat box, but I'm going to read off the definition, and you in your mind can try to guess which competency I'm describing here, and then I'll show it. Learners actively participate in creative activities, generate new ideas, and use them to solve problems. That is our definition of creative thinking. And again, we don't like to call it creativity and problem solving or creativity and innovation. It is creative thinking. It's a subset of creativity. There's some people like myself who think that, there's creative attitudes, creative affect. We're not really talking about that so much. But notice that solving problems is part of this. And the reason why I say that is if we look at the next one, learners identify patterns in relationships, evaluate ideas, and use these skills to solve problems. That's our idea of critical thinking. And again, creative thinking and critical thinking oftentimes work together to solve problems. That's why we don't have a special skill of problem solving. Problem solving is the result of using these skills, not the skill itself to us. Oh, you didn't see that. You didn't see that. I got jumpy. Sorry about that. Learners develop their own practical skills to support and take control of their learning and reflect on their own progress. That's what we consider learning to learn, also sometimes called metacognition. We think, this one of the skills of the future is being able to teach yourself things. Learners choose the most appropriate language to use in different situations, manage conversations effectively, and express themselves clearly and confidently. That's what we consider communication. A lot of times I think that we think we're doing communication in our classrooms because we're doing pair work or group work, but communication may not be happening, not this definition of communication. I remember vividly a class that I had where students were doing pair work and they were doing the past tense. That's what kind of teacher I was back then. And, their pair work sounded like, what did you do yesterday? I went to the movies. And you, what did you do yesterday? I went to the movies with you. Finish, teacher. And, they used the target language. They used the grammar. They completed the exercise. I wouldn't even call it a task. They did what I wanted them to, but it didn't feel right, because why would you tell somebody you went to the movies yesterday if they already knew that you did? Speaking was happening, but communication wasn't. So it's very important to define what we mean by communication. Also, another one that we think sometimes happens in our classes because learners are working in groups is collaboration. But it's not just being in groups, it's learners working well together, actively taking part, listening to others, sharing tasks, and again, finding solutions to problems. And then the last one, which is a huge one, learners recognizing, describing different roles, responsibilities. It involves culture, both our own culture and understanding other culture and global issues. A huge one is social responsibilities. Because we were able to clearly define them, we were able to take these competencies and put them into core areas. And that's why if you look again at our framework, you'll see that things branch out from creative thinking. So things branch out from, for example, what makes up creative thinking? Well, with my definition now, I can say creative thinking involves preparing for creativity, generating ideas, implementing ideas, and solving problems. And I think this is important too, because it helps us clarify as teachers. A lot of times when I did teacher training in Malaysia pre-pandemic, I would go into classrooms and I would hear teachers, tell me in my workshops, my students just won't do any critical thinking. They can't come up with any of their own ideas. And I wanted to say, well, is that critical thinking or is that creative thinking? It's some type of thinking, but are we saying that all type of thinking is critical thinking? I think that we automatically put critical thinking in front of it. even when the type of thinking we want is some other kind of thinking. So making sure that we can define this, then it lets us know, oh, brainstorming, these activities, generating more ideas, coming up with a different way to solve problems. Well, that's not critical thinking, that's creative thinking. Or collaboration. It's not just getting in groups and working on a project. It's taking personal responsibility, and that allows us to focus on teachers of not just saying, did your group finish the class, but what was your role in the class? What did you contribute to making this project happen? It influences our feedback. So encouraging effective group interaction, asking, okay, you have the product, but what about the process? In our previous session, I think Thomas really said, sometimes it's about the journey, not the destination. What are we focusing on the process of what just happened in our class? Managing the sharing of tasks. Do you feel that it was done fairly? Working towards task completion. And again, by further breaking it down, we get an idea so that these don't just become dreams of what we want in the classroom. They start to become practical aims that we can incorporate into our lesson. Once we have aims, then we can start making tasks that develop them. And even things like communication, using appropriate language, facilitating interactions, participating with confidence and clarity. I'm not going to go through all of them just because of time. I will be saying that I'll be giving you a handout with this later so that you can go back and review. In a 30-minute session, I can hopefully just get your appetite warmed so that you're interested enough to go and search for yourself. I can't go over everything. But I do want to say with those core areas, what we've done at Cambridge is we've been able to further define them into components so that if we look at creative thinking in those core areas, we can look at what does preparing for creativity look like. Well, it looks like participating in a range of creative activities, exploring issues and concepts, considering multiple perspectives, finding connections. Or if it's generating ideas, coming up with multiple ideas or elaborating and combining ideas. So I hope what you're seeing that's different that we've done at Cambridge is we haven't just said we want creativity. We said we want creative thinking. These are the core areas. These are how these can be further broken down. And that helps us focus on which aspects we want to see as a teacher. And it becomes more actionable. It takes the theory and it makes it practical. Now, I said it's a 3D framework because we also have included what I like to call the length. We've included what we've called the mapping of the learning journey. And for these 5 stages, we've tried to look at what each of those core areas mean at these different ages. Because creative thinking, or critical thinking, I could say, to a pre-primary student isn't going to be as complex as what we would expect to somebody in higher education. So we've been able to map these competencies with these core areas across the learning journey. And that's what's allowed us to make true competencies in the form of CanDo statements. So that if I want to look at critical thinking and I want to look specifically at understanding and analyzing links and arguments, and then I want to look even further, identifying and classifying information, well, then I could say, what does that look like at the pre-primary level? Well, the transferable skill is sorting and arranging and describing objects by shape, size, color, weight, texture. Or at the higher education, that's where it's talking about identifying the key points in an argument. And then I can start thinking about example language that I want to hear to connect the skill with the language use. That's what 3 dimensions allows us to do. Now at Cambridge, we're overtly and covertly incorporating these into our own courses, but I want to have a look at how you can do it. So there are 3 different ways, briefly, that I think that we can talk about how we do this. I know I'm right at time. Let me go ahead and get through this. We'll get through it fast, I promise. One is to notice and exploit opportunities that are already embedded in course materials. We have course books already. Of course, I'm using a Cambridge course book here for an example, but whatever you use is fine. Find those times when we have, opportunities, for example, with this one, drawing a map or a weather symbol. that is obviously about collaboration and communication. And don't just give feedback on the language. We can give feedback based on those components that we want to see of it. So if it's collaboration and working in groups, I could ask students to talk about how they felt they can contribute to this as part of the feedback. Or at the secondary level, if I'm looking at thinking outside the box, really telling students that this is a creative thinking activity. I worry about the students who are doing creative thinking activities in our classroom, but they don't feel they're creative because a teacher hasn't pointed out that we've done a creative activity. And again, this fits very much thinking outside the box with generating ideas. I can make that as a component into the lesson. So if you are very top down, if you don't have a lot of flexibility, finding the opportunities for feedback in the lesson is one of the things that you can do. Secondly, maybe you can add or modify an activity. And to help you with this, Cambridge has made what we call life competency cards. We have one for each of the core areas. Here's one for young people. It's an activity called Let's Change It. And you can see that we have an idea or an activity that teachers can use tomorrow in the classroom. Whether you're teaching face-to-face or online, down at the bottom, you can see there's something for teaching online. We have the same core area, for teens and adults. And we've developed these life competency cards with activities that you can take and use. And we at Cambridge, even if you're not using our books, we have made these available for free. And I'm going to share with you the link so that you can have a look. And if you want to work on learning to learn and this specific aspect for this age, you can go straight to this card and look at an activity that you could bring into the class tomorrow. And the third thing that we could do is plan lessons around a competency or core area, making the competency as, part of our implementation. This is what we do at Cambridge, talking about adding it as a learning objective, using the framework to find the suitable learning objective, and considering any language, just like I showed you before. That's what we do in the planning. And we've developed these booklets that talk about how to do it. And again, I'm going to give you a link that will give you these booklets absolutely free. So if this is something you want to do in your classrooms, there's different ways to do it. I like to call these 3 different ways: mild, medium, and spicy. You could just either give feedback based on your course back activity books, a little bit different, or you can adapt activities. That's the medium, or you could plan your own lessons. That's the spicy one. The level that is up to you and your freedom. But again, this is an example. These come from those booklets. And then during the lesson, like I said, we can make students aware that we're developing those competencies. We're doing this to develop our creative skills. We're doing this for our critical thinking and making it overt and not just hoping that it gets acquired, that we're intentionally teaching it. We observe students and we give out that appropriate feedback, and we encourage self and peer assessment to themselves. I like to say, WWW and EBIs in my classrooms. I like to have my students ask what went well and what would be even better if, and have them write about it, but not about their language use, about, what went well with working together if I'm focusing on collaboration, or what went well with how you expressed yourself. How could it be even better if? And focus that based on the feedback the teachers give and how they self-reflect. And again, that the way that we've broken down those core areas into competencies can help students focus on those individual areas. And then after the lesson, we as teachers reflect on what went well and what could be improved for next time. We share successes and challenges with our other teachers. We talk about, maybe joining a community focused on sharing the ideas that we had for our lessons. And most important, it's a form of assessment. If you want to know how to assess this, it's a formative assessment approach. We tried this creative thinking activity. They were great at it, but they didn't collaborate well. I want to bring in one of those collaborative components into it next time. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you today. If you go to this link, cambridge.org/CLCF, you will find the framework. You will find an introduction booklet, which goes more into depth of what I was talking about today, explaining more about the core areas and the components. You will find a booklet for each of the competencies if you want to really focus on one. Again, they're like pizza toppings. If you want an everything pizza, you can. If you want only pepperoni, you can. So it's up to you how you bring them into the classroom. Base it on what your students need. but again, all of that's there. Again, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, if you're like, I don't have time to develop full lesson plans, I have a strict curriculum, I could maybe adapt an activity, that's where you can find those cards with some practical activities for classroom or online teaching, like I said, that is just grab and go that you can use tomorrow that develop it. Or again, there's examples in those booklets about looking at textbook pages, if you are forced to use a textbook, of opportunities to bring in the type of feedback based on these competencies into our lesson. That's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope you got something out of it. I hope that you go to cambridge.org/CLCF. Again, all of this stuff, it's absolutely 100% free. So if you don't like it, we'll give you your money back. And that's my session, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam, for the sharing. Definitely very fruitful and interesting. Yes, interesting. So do you have any questions? I have one.
Okay.
I'm actually interested, the idea of having the framework in a form of pizza. So it's like, can the skills be taken out, at random, I mean, selectively, or it goes accordingly?
Absolutely. Like I said, all of those competencies are like pizza toppings. Some people only want a pepperoni pizza. So if you only want to bring in collaboration, fine. And again, how much pepperoni goes on a pizza? Some people only like a little bit. Some people want so much. How you bring it in is completely up to you. Some people want a meat lover's pizza, right? They want every type of meat. So, they want to bring in all the competencies. That's up to you. What's important, though, is that we remember that you can only fit the toppings on the base of your pizza, right? And at the base of our pizza, we can't get so much into teaching creative thinking or critical thinking or communication that we forget that core area is there, where our underlying theme is, we have to have our emotional development, our digital literacy if we're using digital tools, and our language objective in the classroom as well. That has to be in every lesson. Otherwise, if you throw pepperoni and anchovies into a bowl, you don't have a pizza, you have a very weird salad.
Yeah.
So but yeah, as much or as little as you need. And how much should you have? Well, I don't know, because I don't know your classrooms. I don't know your students' needs. I think sometimes we've overdone critical thinking, and we get, like I said, we get upset that our students aren't brainstorming. And I see teachers, the students can think critically. They can identify a good argument or not, but they need more practice developing their own ideas. So switching to creative thinking instead of critical thinking, that sort of thing. I've overtalked that answer, but how did I do on, did I answer the question for you? You don't have to go in a systematic pattern, have the base and then add what you want.
Because some new teachers, when they see the framework, they will see, like, as they will go bit by bit, like a direction.
Yeah. Do I have to go around the circle? No.
Yeah.
That's like going to a salad bar. You don't have to pull everything off the salad bar, pick what you want and put it on in any order you want. Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions? So Indrani Liu mentioned that the CLCF resource is much appreciated. Yeah. And do you have any more? Then let me check. Right.
If you go to the CLCF, it's not just a website. It's like 9 pages of PDFs, 3 different sets of life competencies cards, so many YouTube videos that explain. So when you say, do you have any more? It's not a resource page that's just like, use this course book from Cambridge. It is actually, we believe in this in Cambridge. It's something that we thought, should we sell this or should we give it for free? We think it's so important that part of our role as the nonprofit part of us says this needs to be shared, so that even if you aren't using Cambridge books, this is something to develop. If you're thinking this is all new to me, if you're a new teacher, do I start with the introduction booklet. Don't get overwhelmed by this. Take it one step at a time.
Yes, take one step at a time. And I see that most of them they are able to retrieve all the free booklets. So audience, don't take this opportunity to download the free booklet and explore. Right. Oh, that's one question from Januzi. Are there going to be any new course book based on the concept?
Yes, and we're being intentional with it. This is, like I said, this is, if you looked at that third step of using these as objectives, this is definitely what we are putting into nearly all of our Cambridge University Press courses going forward. Like you said, though, we're not maybe putting all of the competencies in all of our course books. For example, we're I think I can tell you this. It's only going on YouTube. Hope I don't get fired. We're developing like another course book now for young learners, and we decided we need to really focus on learning on to learn for young learners. So there's a really heavy, focus on that, and a little bit of creative thinking with a small bit of critical thinking. And we've kind of, we're not balanced in our approach with that. Then we have another course book that we're kind of updating, and we've gone the other end because it's one that's designed for more hours in the classroom. So we've put a very big critical thinking and creative thinking and learning to learn and social responsibilities approach into it. So even us at Cambridge, are we using this? Absolutely. But like I've recommended to you, we may not be using it in a balanced way for all of our course books because it's not practical. If you only have 4 hours a week to teach, you have to teach English and you have to make some decisions with it. So but I made what should have been a short answer very long. Yes, it's going into all of our course materials going forward. It's something that we feel that strongly about.
Right. So I guess we have reached the end of our session. Thank you so much, Alan. Indeed, life competencies are fundamental to language learning. The activities that you have shared are very practical and applicable in various contexts. And once again, thank you. And this has definitely promised for more session forward. All right. And Ellen, don't forget, we have the presenter coffee breakout one session afterwards. And to those with us right now, do join us at 2 p.m. Malaysian time for the featured speaker panel session entitled Initiatives for Developing Future Skills in LT. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ellen.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.